In a perfect world, Expedition 33 should not exist, because we would already have 10 games of the same quality. The only reason why this title even came into existence in the first place was because a couple of Ubisoft devs were tired of making the same generic, uninspired, slop games, and they felt like they could do more with their talents. So they left and started their own studio, and 5 years later led to the release of Expedition 33. It's funny how fate works sometimes. If Ubisoft were a company that actually made good games, then we might have never gotten this masterpiece in the first place, one that could rewrite some narratives and potentially change the gaming industry as we know it. For years and years and years now, the big industry executives have told us time and time again that nobody wants single-player games anymore, or that the turn-based genre is dying, or even that games need to cost upwards of $90 in order to be sustainable nowadays. Which means that in their twisted and out-of-touch reality, titles like Expedition 33 theoretically should not be able to survive. However, not only did it survive in this supposed cutthroat industry where only the most ruthless megacorporations can reign supreme, but it actually thrived in it. In fact, it quickly became the title with one of the highest rated user scores for any game on Metacritic, already putting it up there with the likes of Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, and all the other universally beloved titles. All of this coming from a studio with a fraction of the manpower and budget. And what's crazy is that this success pretty much came out of nowhere. There was barely any marketing for this game. I can only remember seeing maybe 1 or 2 trailers during indie game shows, and I follow gaming news pretty closely. And in those trailers, it never really felt like Expedition 33 was going to be one of the best games of all time. I'm gonna be honest, it looked like this was going to be just another turn-based RPG that was maybe above average. I don't think anyone really expected this title to absolutely blow every other game out of the water, but I guess that's always the story when it comes to small underdog studios. However, it is nice to see that Expedition 33 was a much bigger success than what anybody had anticipated, because it sets a precedent for other aspiring game studios to follow, for those who come after. What I really want to talk about in this video is how Expedition 33 is a much bigger success than what you may think. It's not just a great game, it's a message to the gaming industry that you don't need a $500 million budget, that you don't need 1,000 plus developers on your project, or that you don't need to charge $80 for your game, because none of those really equate to producing a good game. In fact, oftentimes it does the opposite. There are countless multi-million dollar projects that have crashed and burned in spectacular fashion. The most notable one is Concord, which I know is already beating a long, desiccated, and rotting corpse of a horse. But can you really blame me though? The game was one of the biggest disasters that I've ever seen in my life, and I've been playing video games for over 15 years.
Stop! He's already dead!
But that's besides the point. The point is that Concord is the biggest example of how you can have all the resources in the world with some of the most seasoned industry vets and the complete financial backing from one of the biggest titans in the industry, and your project can still fail horribly. It's not about how many resources you have or how much money you can pump into its development. It's about how effectively you can use what you have. We were led to believe that Expedition 33 would never be able to stand toe-to-toe with modern AAA games, but now, after its release, I think it has a very good chance to win Game of the Year. How Sandfall Interactive managed to pull together Expedition 33 with the resources they had is one of the most inspirational stories that every game developer and publisher should be striving to replicate. You see, this studio wasn't comprised of a bunch of industry veterans who have decades of past experience and knowledge to draw upon. They didn't exactly have the Avengers of game development at their disposal here. In fact, it's more like they had the C team working on this project. This studio was originally created by a couple of disgruntled Ubisoft devs who were unhappy with a career there, and I mean, I don't blame them. It must be exhausting having to deal with so much corporate bureaucracy. Anyways, they left their positions at Ubisoft along with some other junior level developers to start up Sandfall Interactive. But even then, they still needed a few more hands to bring onto the team, mainly a writer and a music composer. So you know what they do? They literally find a writer from Reddit and their music composer from SoundCloud. No, really, they took a chance on some random people on social media websites who might have not had much experience, but had more than enough passion. And it paid off big time because the story and music were by far some of the best that's ever been produced within the gaming medium. This is unprecedented levels of success that AAA gaming companies can only dream of. Ubisoft is probably foaming at the mouth right now to learn what's the secret sauce behind Expedition 33's success. But what they don't know is that they've had it under their noses this whole entire time. Quite literally, a bunch of Sandfall devs were from Ubisoft. However, that's not what I'm referring to. The secret sauce that these AAA companies were missing so much of was passion. Back in 2010, in a now deleted interview, one of the executives at EA says, and I'm paraphrasing here, "We're very comfortable moving the discussion towards online multiplayer gameplay, as opposed to fire and forget single player 25 hours and you're out games. I think that model is finished. Online is where the action is at." Well, talk about saying the quiet part out loud. This EA executive just exposed the entire narrative of the AAA gaming industry that single player games are a thing of the past and everything needs to be a live service now. Now, some might argue that this interview was over 15 years ago, so maybe EA has changed their outlook since then. Well, sort of. They're still releasing single-player games occasionally here and there, but they still fully believe that online multiplayer games are the way to go because recently, in the aftermath of Dragon Age the Veilguard's failure, the CEO commented that this financial failure was due to the lack of live service components. No, it wasn't, because the game was a total piece of shit that nobody liked, but was hardcore astroturfed by the gaming news publications to make it seem like the second coming of Jesus. This is the problem with how modern day AAA corporations approach game development as another avenue for profit rather than an outlet for the artists to express themselves. These executives are pushing the narrative that live service is the only thing that people want nowadays because that's the only thing that's ever profitable for them, but they are proven wrong again and again. There's a huge market for great single-player games that could be extremely profitable if the artists were given the freedom to express themselves. The only problem is that they wouldn't be able to perpetually monetize the game, and thus they wouldn't be able to infinitely increase their profit margins. The only reason why a lot of AAA studios are now trying to move away from releasing single-player titles is because they're insanely expensive to produce, often costing hundreds of millions of dollars, and their profitability usually never makes up for the development costs. However, recent single-player releases from AA or even indie studios have shown that you don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to make a game that people like. For example, Schedule 1, a small indie title made by one guy with a shoestring budget, sold around 5.4 million copies. I mean, I guess it does help that it was 20 bucks. However, Expedition 33 was only 50 bucks, with it being on sale for the first week, and it sold over 2 million copies in just 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Dragon Age the Veilguard couldn't even muster that amount in 6 months. People still want single player titles, it's just that they're waiting for good ones that aren't absolutely infested with corporate greed. Another reason why Expedition 33's success is so much more important for the gaming industry is because it's another point against the myth that turn-based games are dead. And that statement is just verifiably false. The genre has been booming as of late with so many great turn-based games releasing within the last couple of years. Baldur's Gate 3, Metaphor ReFantazio, Octopath Traveler 2, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Sea of Stars, Persona 3 Reload, and now add Expedition 33 to the list. There are so many terrific titles that are coming out now to the point where I would say that we're approaching another renaissance of turn-based games. Unfortunately though, not all companies believe this is the case, like Square Enix, who have been making efforts to move away from the turn-based formula for nearly 2 decades now, ever since FF11 onwards. And the last 3 mainline Final Fantasy games have completely switched over to action-based combat. In an interview conducted in 2022 with Naoki Yoshida, he commented that he feels like the new generation of gamers prefer more action-based games over turn-based ones. He says that this is due to technology getting better and better, and as a result, there was no need to use turn-based because there's no longer a technological limitation. Square Enix was really convinced that full action combat was the way of the future, leaving behind all the fans of the old turn-based formula. As much as I like the recent Final Fantasy titles, I do kinda miss the days when they were turn-based, and I was hoping that Square Enix would one day return back to that era. Disappointingly though, it seems like they're stuck in their ways and would never again make a Final Fantasy like how they used to. However, with the unprecedented success of Expedition 33, that might change because this game has been more Final Fantasy than Final Fantasy has been since 10. It's fully turn-based, as a limited open world with every area being unique, is incredibly deep RPG mechanics, it's heavily story-based, and has some of the most amazing music ever made within the gaming industry. Expedition 33 feels like the true spiritual successor to the Final Fantasy series, except that it's aggressively French. Everything that the old Final Fantasy games were so beloved for still works in the modern era. It's just that the formula needed to be refined a bit in order to fit the current day quality of life. Turn-based games have never gone anywhere and will hopefully continue to flourish because this is one of my favorite genres in gaming. Expedition 33 stands out as a shining example of how you can still deliver quality content without having to nickel and dime your consumers. It's a true passion over profit project that should be an inspiration for other game studios to follow. And at the end of the day, I really do hope that this game does win Game of the Year, not only because it's such a masterpiece of a game and it should win on that alone, but because of what it represents. It's made by a AA studio of 30 developers, one was found on Reddit and the other was found on SoundCloud. It offers around 50 hours of unique, handcrafted content for only $50, and it's the studio's first ever game that they've officially ever released into the world. If this is the type of quality that they can produce, then it's already better than what 90% of these AAA companies have been offering to us for years now. If this doesn't win Game of the Year, then that's how we know the game industry is truly cooked. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down below and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content in the future. See ya.